Well, it's good to be back. It's been 5 years. Hard to believe. But my name is Art Cunningham. This is my wife Debbie back there in the red. And we are from Trinity Baptist Church in Williston, Vermont, sent out through GFA out of Greenville, South Carolina. And once again, making our headquarters in the great state of Indiana at Shepherd's Bethel, which has been our great joy. It was our first home. First home that we had of our own. Like we lived with a family in church and then with another family in church when we first got married. And then at the beginning of really New Year's 99, we came to Shepherd's Bethel and it was just like, our own place. So it's good to be back. Debbie's going to have to correct me, but I think this is the first church where I've seen identical twins. Are you identical with your brother? Okay, we have identical boys, Robert and David, and so they're usually completely separate, one in Greenville and one in Phoenix. And this last week we were up in Phoenix and Robert came and we had, people had a lot of fun with that. One guy was saying, "You're David." He goes, "I'm not David, I'm Robert." He goes, "No." And then David came up and he just couldn't believe it. They're so identical. So it's great to meet Avery and Olivia. Also, it's been now 5 years. Thank you for your financial support. That's what keeps us on the field. In the back, just to my right, I guess it would be to your left, there's a display and there's a sign-up sheet if you want to receive our emails, to follow us, to pray for us, which I hope you would do, by the way. Write your name, and then when you write your email address, write it carefully because any mistakes at all, and we'll have to chase you up. Judah, you ready up there? And is our mic doing okay? Yeah. Okay, Judah, so there's a short presentation. It'll kind of show you where we've been the last 5 years.
We are the Cunninghams, Art and Debbie. We are missionaries to England with Gospel Fellowship Association. Our sending church is Trinity Baptist Church in Williston, Vermont.
We are working with Christ Church Bradford to evangelize the great city of Bradford in Yorkshire. Our burden is to witness to the Muslims here and to see them turn from darkness to the light.
Art began serving as a missionary in 1992, and together we have served in England since 2001. We have ministered here in Bradford since January 2020.
We serve at Christ Church Bradford, led by Tim Mills, Martin Green, and Richard Lawrence. Christ Church seeks to fulfill the mission described in 2 Peter 1:19, a light that shines in a dark place.
I'd say that we may show forth, declare the praises of him who called us out of darkness into his most marvelous light. We want to do God some justice as we worship him.
Our desire is to bring encouragement to this church in the ministry of winning souls. We have sought to support the leadership as they seek to build a church healthy in doctrine, worship, and fellowship.
Almost every week we bring a Moldovan family to church that was reached by the evangelistic effort to the city center. We are praying that God would bring fruit from this family.
We became involved in 3 outreaches from Christ Church: Hot Potato, Bradford City Center, and Lister Park.
For the Hot Potato, we invite the neighbors for a light lunch and then preach a short message to challenge them in the faith. This outreach has grown tremendously, with more than a dozen lost people hearing the gospel on any given Tuesday.
In Bradford City Center, at a place called the Will Exchange, we set up a table and hand out literature and engage people with the gospel. Many people here have English as a second language, and we strive to provide gospel literature in their first language.
Deb has organized tracts in 40-plus languages, such as
Turkish,
Merhaba,
Latvian,
Labdien,
Ukrainian,
Jak sprava,
Spanish,
Estoy muy bien,
Arabic,
Shukran,
Somali,
Adbat umahad samtahay,
Romanian.
Cu placeri.
Often people are very surprised to get a tract in their own language, and it opens up a wide door for a witness.
At the Lister Park Outreach, a team of 4 to 6 people walk around the park, usually in pairs, and seek to engage people with tracts and to start gospel-related conversation. We sometimes spend almost a whole 90 minutes opening the scriptures, defending the faith, and challenging people to believe the word.
Acts 17, verse 2 and 3 says that the Apostle Paul reasoned with them out of the scriptures, opening and alleging that Christ must needs have suffered and risen again from the dead, and that this Jesus, whom I preach unto you, is Christ.
Bradford is a city of over 500,000 people, with over 30% being Muslims, most from a Pakistani background. It is sometimes known locally as Bradistan because of the predominance of the Pakistanis.
God seems to have given us a very open door with these Muslim souls. Revelation 3:8 says, "Behold, I have set before you an open door, and no man can shut it."
It's wonderful, really, just to be able to talk to Muslims about the Christian faith, because it's so refreshing compared with trying to speak to British people who are of a traditional British background, and so many of them are atheists, and they think it's rather strange even to believe in God. But the Muslims, of course, at least they believe in God, and so they don't think it's strange to be talking about religion, and so we can have often a very friendly conversation with them, and it gives us opportunity. Although they're trying to put forward their point of view, often they will set aside from that and listen to what we have to say, and then we can share about the Lord Jesus Christ, what he's done perhaps in our own lives.
We have sought to follow two principles with the Muslims. One, earnestly contend for the faith, which was once delivered unto the saints, Jude 1:3. And two, be ready always to give an answer to every man that asks you a reason of the hope that is in you, 1 Peter 3:15.
Also, very commonly, Muslims have some objection to us worshipping Jesus. They have some objection to God having a son. They have some objection to God being one who is three. With these, it can be very helpful to work through John chapter 5, where Jesus explains that he is the same God as the Father, doing the same works, and yet he is also from the Father and distinct from the Father, where Jesus says that everyone should worship him just as they worship the Father.
We desire to make an impact among these precious souls by learning some Urdu, the language spoken in most Muslim homes, providing literature in Urdu and other languages used by Muslims here, and focusing in prayer on these Muslim people lost in the darkness.
Our challenges to you are four. 1, love the Muslims and seek to share the gospel with them here in the States. 2, pray for the gospel to impact the Muslims in England and especially in Bradford. The Bible speaks about prayer that can move mountains.
3, visit us on the field and help to reach the Muslims and all the people of Bradford. And then 4, be willing to go wherever he sends, joining Isaiah in saying, "Here am I, send me."
Ever since we left just at New Year's 2020, arriving actually just the last day of 2019. We just settled down in Bradford. Took us actually 7 weeks to locate a house. Just getting ready to get started, and COVID hit. In England, they would say, stay home, save lives, and support the NHS. So we didn't really start our outreach per se until that let up a little bit. And the first thing we did was that Saturday outreach. That's setting up a table in the marketplace near the big mall, and then trying to reach every single person that comes through. A lot of young people, offering them a leaflet, trying to talk to them, sharing the gospel as much as we can. As the video says, Debbie has set up over 40 languages, and that was the first year, 2020. 2021, that year, Randy and Bonnie Studdard came to join us. They're longtime missionaries to Cameroon, and then for a short time to Turkey. They were retired, or basically retired, but they wanted to have one more go. And so they went that year, 2021, and actually they're house sitting for us these 4 months. So they continue to keep their hand in the ministry. Working with the Studdards was a great privilege. Really lovely folks with a true dedication to preaching the gospel. We were, looking what would be the way to reach out to the Muslims in the area. Normally we had done that by finding a place where there were Muslim shops, stores, and so on. But it was Randy's idea to go to this park, Lister Park. And skeptical at first, but we did it, and it has been a real open door. It's in a neighborhood that has about 75% Muslims, Pakistani Muslims, all throughout that area. So it's not just the Muslims that we reach, but predominantly it's Muslims that answer and that talk. Very, very normal to be in the park, hour and a half, and to spend most of that time opening the scriptures, arguing the scriptures with the Muslims, trying to persuade them. Oftentimes, at least 2 or 3 times, we spent the whole hour and a half talking to one person, and that one person we gave a New Testament to. So that's ongoing while we're here. There are even more people than there were when we were there. Randy and Bonnie have taken our place, and a couple others have filled in. So it's a dynamic ministry. Oftentimes, the whole 4 people to 6 people have 2, 3, 4 very good conversations every Thursday. Then the third year, 2022, we became more involved in what's called Hot Potato. The church opens the building more for people that are in the neighborhood, older people mostly, but have a free Tuesday afternoon for either a lunch or light snacks. They come in, we befriend them, and then at some point they get a very challenging message from the gospel, short, 5 to 7 minutes, but hopefully punchy. And it's very unusual. I don't know how many people you get here lost sitting in a service at any given time. We hardly ever see in regular services that many, but as up to a dozen people coming week after week after week and listening to the gospel. Really amazing. So 20, 21, 22, the first 3 years. The last year and a half we were there, 2023 and the first part of 24, we were deciding what we should do. What was the Lord have for us? We were old enough to retire. We are now about 135 between the two of us. So we gave a very serious thought to retiring. And I'm not against retirement. I'm not trying to say that, but we felt clearly the Lord said, keep going. So then we struggled with, okay, what could we do? I had some real health problems, not as serious as some people, but I was in the emergency room twice with some questions. I thought, well, there are climates where it would be easier and better. So we looked at that. Lord very clearly showed us. So we were looking at these other things. I laid out to our director, a guy named Alan Patterson. He said, stay where you are. I said, okay, will the Lord confirm that? I was talking to Dave Sturtzbaugh, my mentor, and he was doing like this pulpit supply ministry in Antioch, California. And he said, oh, great. He said, if you're going to be on furlough, come to Antioch and share your ministry with the Muslims, which is another way of saying stay put. And then it looked like that was confirmed. I was in Wales with a friend, Joe Nicholson, visiting him. And he said, oh, somebody dropped off a box of books for you, about 15 books. I brought it home and opened it up, and it was all books about ministering to Muslims or understanding Islam. And we just took that as the Lord's confirmation. So we're going back right where we were, Christchurch, Bradford. Our house is still being rented and house sat by the Studdards. Our car hopefully is being moved around so that when we come, we can have it up and running right away and hit the ground running. We leave the second to the last day in January, and then overnight we land the last night. So February 1st we'll be up and running. So that's basically what we've been doing since the last time we were here. 5 years, 2019. Thank you for your support. And then what I'd like to do is give a challenge from the Word, but I wonder if there's any questions you have either for me or for Debbie before we look at the Word. Yes, sir. Deb? Yeah, what I find is that they're like unlike the average person that you're meeting, they're taught to win us. Like they have what they call dawah, evangelism, just like the Bible teaches us to do. They're taught in Islam, and they're very confident. They're growing. Like people think Muslims are just growing by immigration, which is true. They're also growing by larger families, which is true. But they're also growing by winning people who are very nominal. So I have a nephew in New Hampshire who turned Muslim to marry this Muslim girl. So they're very much engaging. So when you're reaching them, young or old, they think to talk to you. Mostly, not everyone. And it's all on a scale. Like the average, do you remember Anne, the really quiet lady that was speaking in the video? And she said, it's a refreshing compared to the average person from a British background. Mostly, it's not that you'll never get a good conversation or interest, but the Muslims seem really to engage, young and old, men and women, actually. Yes, sir. Do I converse in? Well, I can converse in Spanish and a very little bit in Urdu because I've studied it. Otherwise, I know all those phrases up there in the presentation. Those are all ones that I know and use, sort of, because I've learned how to say hello, how are you, in a few different languages. But the ones I can actually hold a conversation would be English. Our American English goes fine over there, and a Spanish if I ever have the opportunity. There are lots of languages that we encounter that I can't speak in. And I try to be able to say hello and, ask them what language and then give them something in their own language. But I'm not like multilingual. I can speak Spanish. When we went on holiday, we went to Spain, and it was since the only other country where I spoke Spanish was America. This is a great country for Spanish. I don't know about here, like right here in Bedford, but a lot of Spanish speakers around, like we were in Arizona. It's really, really useful here. And then in Spain, also helpful. But only two, and a very little bit of Urdu. Yes, sir. Okay, so we haven't converted anybody from Islam in our ministry, and that's me, which is 30 years, Joseph, 25 years in Birmingham, and Bob Rutledge in Slough. One guy that we witnessed to became a converted Christian, but not like he's someone that we witnessed to in Birmingham, but he was living in Nottingham. He came back and told us, I got saved and I'm baptized in the church. So Joseph, the guy that I work with in Birmingham, was saved out of Islam. Basically, there's two ways that can go. One is you can be killed. We haven't seen that. But what's more very common is a Muslim who converts is completely cut off from his family, which is a really big deal. Like in my family, some of us are close and some of us aren't. But in Islam, they all tend to be very close. It's a really big deal. Have you ever heard of Nabil Qureshi? So there's a book on the table, Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. He's from California. His dad was Navy. He became convinced about Christianity, very convinced of the truth of it, but would not become a Christian because he knew he would lose his family. As a matter of fact, he said, I would kill my mom. Not literally, but it would be such a big blow to her. He really, really struggled until one night the Lord seemed to say to him, it's not about you. And then he became a Christian. So it's a really big deal, losing your family. But we've never seen anybody killed from being a convert, although it is taught in Islam. Yes, sir. It's a really good question. So the question is, do we ever use the Quran and its inconsistencies? And if you'd asked me 15 years ago, I would have said, no, not really. But in 2010, I was really discouraged from what we were doing, and I was taught, look, you can't always just defend. You need to bring it to them. So the thing that I use out of the Quran is the Quran itself says there are 4 books that came from God. The Torah, so that would be first 5 books of Moses. The Zabur, which literally is the Psalms, but maybe the poetic books. The Injil, which nobody really knows what that is. Is that the New Testament? Is that the Gospels? Is that the teaching of Jesus? And these books are said in the Quran to be from God. A very common approach that Muslims will take to answer you is, well, the Bible's been changed. Then I come back to them and say, well, you say Allahu Akbar, God is great, and yet you say that the Bible's been changed. If God gave the Bible and man can change the Bible, how is God great? Which I believe is an inconsistency in Islam and in the Quran. There are other ones, but that's the one for sure I use. In the back, someone. Yes, sir. Okay, so threats and rejections, yes. When we were in Birmingham, we were threatened by a police officer with arrest, which never materialized. When we were in Birmingham, we were threatened by a group of young men, and there were 3 of us out there, and I said, let's go, and they said, we're not going anywhere. And I was really nervous because they said, we'll give you 10 minutes, and if we come back, we're going to beat you. And I thought, well, we could do this work somewhere else where they wouldn't see us. But my 2 friends, the guy who was a converted Muslim and this guy, Ben, they just laughed. They said, we're not going anywhere. And in this case, they came back and they didn't give a beating. And we've been threatened sometimes in the park in Bradford, but nothing's ever happened. Okay. Seeing no hands, then let's turn to Romans chapter 10. And I didn't really want to preach a message, but I wanted to make an appeal to you. I feel a bit funny as a missionary coming hat in hand, but that's what I'm doing. You know, here we are. We have gone, this is 32 years that we've been doing this, and actually 30 in England. And the question about converting the Muslims, it's always been our desire, and it's always been our belief that they could be converted and brought into the church. We just never seen it. So what I want to come to you and say is, this is something which is really a matter of prayer. And you know, whereas going is something that you can't do really, unless you went as an envoy of the church here. And you could do that, by the way, no expenses. You can come for the ministry, or you could come to see things. But you can't, without getting on a plane or whatever, you can't do it. But you can pray here the same as we can pray there. And this is a promise that's been given to us for these big answers. So this is a big ask. Like we hear. So if I say to you, I want you to pray that God would bring in a big harvest, which I have done in not every church, but a number of churches, supporting churches, but people come back and say, well, don't worry about that. You know, God, the results are all about God. All you need to do is be faithful to what you're doing. And we're promising you that we're going to do that. And we have done that. And the lady, the really quiet lady that was speaking, she's exactly right. The Lord has really given us a wide open door to preach the gospel to these Muslims, which is really what we wanted. If you'd asked me at the beginning, I would say, what I want is to be able to preach the gospel to the Muslims. And the Lord has really answered that. I'm not coming and asking, pray that we have an open door with the Muslims. We have that. But here's Paul in verse 10. He says, brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they may be what? Anybody have it there? Saved. Are we using the KJV? Anything? It doesn't matter. Well, that's what I have. Is saved. You know, he was giving the gospel. He was challenging them. He was enduring all kinds of things. And he's saying, look, it's not enough for me that I'm giving out the word. It's not enough for me that they're receptive in hearing. He says, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they may be saved. He says, I bear them a record that they have this zeal of God. This is not that message today, but if you look at it, it really speaks a lot about Islam. I mean, he's speaking about Israel, but it's very applicable to Islam. They have this zeal of God, but not according to knowledge. For they, going about to establish their own righteousness, have failed to submit to the righteousness of God. And you look at the fanaticism. I don't mean like the terrorists, but just the Islam itself, the memorization of the Quran, the fasting in the month of Ramadan, the 5 daily prayers, the trip to Mecca, all these things, their love for the Muslim community, and actually their love for Muhammad, saying that he's greater than Christ. All these things respond to what he's saying here about going about to establish their own righteousness. And so Paul's talking about that. He says, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel, not Islam. We're saying Islam. He's saying Israel, is that they would be saved. He's thankful for the opportunity to give the gospel. He's thankful for the open doors, all the opportunities had, but he says, my prayer and what he is asking them to pray for is that they'd be saved. And that's what I want to put in front of you. This is something where you can do the work here as much as we can do the work there as far as prayer. Matter of fact, at the end, I'm going to tell you, we're Eastern time here. I'm going to give you Eastern time, all these outreaches. So if you want to pray, it's early in the morning. So that's not everybody's best time, but that's the reality. They go on at noontime, and noontime is 7 o'clock here. They go on at 11, that's 6 o'clock. It can't be helped, and you could pray at other times. But so the first thing is, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they might be saved. And I'm saying to you, our desire, Debbie and mine, the people that work with us on the outreach, is to see them saved. Not just to hear, we're thankful for that, but that they would be saved, baptized, join the church. This gentleman asked a question. There was one guy, we witnessed to him one time in Birmingham, and then he was up in Nottingham. He came back and said, look, you witnessed to me, I got saved, I'm baptized, and I'm in the church serving. One guy in 103 years. That's the truth of it. Bob Rutledge, who I worked with first, 25 years. Joseph Abraham, who I worked with in Birmingham, 25 years. Me, 30 years. 25, 80. Debbie, 23 years. Between us, other people working with us, but 103 years. Somebody said, how many Muslims do you see converted a week, a month? I said, well, one every 1,200 months or something like that. Saved and baptized to join the church. And that's the truth of it. It's a sad truth. And, Pastor Sturzbaugh, the mentor, we just came from him, and he says, I believe this is the time when God is going to do something, bigger in that way. And I pray that would be so. And my challenge to you is to join us in that. So I want to say to you, think about this. If I come to my own churches and say, this is our heart's desire, is to see the next step taken and Muslims saved, baptized, and in the church, and then people come back and say, don't worry about that. That's not up to you. All you need to do is be giving out the word. God will give the increase. They're saying, no, don't think that way. Well, I won't think that way if you can show me the scriptures teach me not to think that way. And what I want to do is I want to read out 9 New Testament verses, not only just verses, because a couple of them are 2 or 3 verses, and to show you that there's always this idea of big answers, or all the passages I'm showing you. It really seems to be an emphasis in the New Testament, not that we pray just to relieve ourselves, or it's a way of meditating upon God. Of course, it is those things also, but there always seems to be this idea of ask big things. Think about this. Suppose you were a general, and you were leading your people in battle, and you're having a great victory. Matter of fact, not only are you having great victory, but God is fighting for you, and He's throwing down huge hailstones to kill the enemy. And now the sun is going down, the day is coming to an end. As a leader, what would you think? What would you want to do? I look at this passage and I say, man, I would say my natural reaction would be, well, let's go home, bind up our wounded and get ready for the next day and thank God for what He's doing. And Joshua, he stands up and he says, sun, stand still, and moon in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still and the moon stood still for the space of a whole day. so they could avenge themselves on their adversaries, is asking something really huge. It says there was never a day like it before, and there never been a day like it since, where God hearkened to the voice of a man in this way and stretched out the day. Can you even think to do that? And yet this is an example that is taught all throughout the New Testament. So in Matthew chapter 7, verse 7, this is the Sermon on the Mount. He's teaching many things here, but one of them is about prayer. And in verse 7 and 8, he says, "Ask, and it will be given you. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. For everyone who asks receives, and he that seeks finds, and to him that knocks it shall be opened." Answers. Ask and you'll receive. Seek and you'll find. Knock and it will be opened. Matthew 21:22. Again, the same idea. All 9 of these passages, you should look for a phrase that says something like big answers. So this one, everyone who asks receives. That's the idea. It's all about asking for something big and receiving it. Matthew 21 in verse 22. "And all things whatsoever ye shall ask in prayer, believing ye shall receive." How wide is that application? All things that you ask in prayer, believing you shall receive. Mark chapter 11, verse 24. Next book over. "Therefore I say to you, what things soever ye desire when ye pray, believe that you receive them, and ye shall have them." What things soever. John 14:13. Last of the Gospels. And there are 4 different passages here. There are more, but there's 4 we're going to look at. John 14 and 13. Every one of these, the emphasis is answers. Big answers. 14, 13. "Whatsoever you shall..." Well, let's go to verse 12. "I say unto you, he that believes on me, the works that I do shall he do also, and greater works than these shall he do, because I go unto my Father." 13. "And whatsoever you ask in my name, that will I do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you shall ask anything in my name, I will do it." Big answers. Big prayers. John 15:7. You don't have to turn the page. "If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ye shall ask what ye will, and it shall be done unto you." Same page. Verse 16. "You've not chosen me, but I have chosen you and ordained you, that you should go and bring forth fruit, and that your fruit should remain, that whatsoever you shall ask of the Father in my name, he may give it to you." Whatsoever you ask of the Father, he will give it to you. Same page, 16:23 and 24. "And in that day you will ask nothing. Verily, verily, I say unto you, whatsoever you ask the Father in my name, he will give it you." Whatsoever. "Hitherto you've asked nothing in my name. Ask, and you shall receive, that your joy may be full." 8. 1 John chapter 3. We say 1 John. In England we say 1 John. 1 John chapter 3. And verse 22. "And whatsoever we ask, we receive of him, because we keep his commandments and do those things that are pleasing in his sight." And 1 page over, chapter 5, verse 14 and 15. "This is the confidence that we have in him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And we know that he hears us. Whatsoever we ask, we know that we have the petitions that we desired of him." Here's just 9 passages. You could look for more. You could look for examples in the Old Testament. Here's Elijah. And Elijah prays, and it doesn't rain for 3.5 years. Then Elijah prays, and it rains. And James says, he's a man subject to like passions as we are. In other words, he's nothing special. I mean, he's nothing special in that way. He's just like you. Like we think, oh, he's one of these amazing men of God, which is true. But you know, he prays like this. He says, you bring the 450 prophets of Baal, and I'll be the only one on the other side. And they make their sacrifice. And he says, now you call out to your god Baal, and what will happen? Call down for fire. No fire. He's mocking them. He says, maybe your god Baal is asleep. Maybe he's taking a phone call. Call louder or whatever. He's mocking him all day long. Then he says, okay, come over to my sacrifice. He says, pour 4 barrels of water. 4 barrels. He says, now pour 4 more. 8 barrels. He says, now 4 more. 12 barrels. He calls out to God. He says, show who is God in heaven. The fire comes down. It burns up the sacrifice. It burns up the wood. It burns up the stones. It burns up the sand and the ground around it. Amazing answer to prayer. Then what happens? Jezebel says, this time tomorrow, you'll be dead just like these prophets. And he runs away. And he's scared. And he says, I'm the only one left. And he says, let me die. He's a man subject to like passions. And yet, he had these tremendous answers to prayer. Jesus is teaching us here. He says, look, the things that I do, you can do. And greater things I do can you do because I go to my Father. Then he says, ask anything. We're not, all right, so you say, well, I asked for the Ferrari and I didn't get it. We're not talking about that. These are all talking about within the will of God. And that's what we're talking about, the salvation of souls. Not aggrandizing ourselves or material wealth kind of a thing like it's taught somewhere. The Bible doesn't really teach that. But it does teach, look, when you're asking for the kingdom, it says you can ask in a great and a powerful way and you can receive it. These 9 passages, Elijah, and that's not all of Elijah. Elijah, the widow woman makes a place for Elijah, and then her son dies, and he tells Gehazi, is that Elijah or Elisha? He says, go and put the stick on top of him, and he puts the stick on, nothing happens. He himself actually lays on top of him 3 times and prays, and then his life comes back to him. Amazing, amazing answers to prayer. All right, and that's what we're asking for. Islam, the conversion of Muslims. And this is Romans 10:1. My heart's desire and prayer to God is that they would be saved. These are not asking for trivial things. These are really important. These are eternal souls. And the truth is, on a Sunday night in Illinois, this pastor's gone to be with the Lord, and he wasn't rejoicing in it, but I came up and said, this is our ministry to Muslims. ISLAM. That's how you spell Islam. ISLAM, which stands in my mind for I sincerely love all Muslims. And the pastor got up after and said, in our church we hate the Muslims. Well, this is not the way. This is not the way. We're not special. Do you think God looked at us and said, oh, wow, wonderful people, they'll be saved? No, and the Bible teaches that's not the case. He did it according to his own pleasure and own will. There's nothing about them that's any worse than us. There's nothing about us that makes us any better than anyone else. And they should hear the gospel and they should be saved. So number 1, Romans 10:1. My heart's desire, my wife's desire, and the desire of our team is we're thankful for the open door. We're thankful for the opportunity to give the gospel and to be wrangling these things out with the Muslims, but our prayer to God is that they would be saved. Number 2, look at all these passages. And what I'm trying to say is, I believe this is the tenor of the New Testament. This is what we should be looking for. Amazing things to happen. Look at John 14:12. He says, the things that I do, you will do, and greater things than these will you do, because I go to the Father. We should be looking that there would be works that were comparable or more powerful than what Jesus did through our prayer. And that's exactly what he teaches. He says, look, you should be doing greater things than I do. And he says, and whatsoever you ask in my name, I'll do it. In other words, the greater things, it's not exactly saying so, but if you make the connection, it seems that he's saying, you'll do the greater things because of the answers to prayer. I'll be at the Father, you'll be asking, and I'll be doing these things. John 14, 12, 13, 14. 12, you'll do greater works than I do. 13, 14, ask whatever you will in the will of God, and I'll be there at the right hand, and we'll be doing these things so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. Number 2. Number 3, invitation to prayer. So there are basically, we're only involved in 3 of these outreaches, but I'd like to list all 4 of them for you. On a Tuesday morning, our time from 11 till 1, pardon me, 11 to 2 is this hot potato, which honestly, I wasn't that keen on it at first. It's like offering people a free lunch, but all these lost people come and they sit to hear the word, and I'm not arguing with it anymore. I'm on board and really love those people, and they become like a family to us, honestly. And then in the evening, One Way Club is in the evening from 6:15 to around 8. Then on Thursday, Lister Park, that's the park where about 75% to 80% Pakistani Muslims in that neighborhood. That goes from 11 to 12:30. And the Will Exchange, that's the table with the 40 languages. And it's by the Broadway, which we think of the Broadway one way, but the Broadway is like the big mall. This is a city of 500 and some thousand people. So it's not a big mall, but it's the mall for Bradford. There's one for Leeds that's bigger and nicer. There's one for Manchester that's really a lot nicer. Okay, so those times I gave you are UK times. Here's the times in EST, English time. So the hot potato, the one where the older folks come on a Tuesday afternoon, is 6 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday morning. Early risers, well, 9 o'clock, you don't have to be an early riser for that one. One Way Club, that's like, do we have Awanas? Something like Awanas, we call it One Way Club. We're not that involved in it. We bring a guy, like you saw the ma and the daughter, we said we bring them every week. Their son, who's like 8, he wants to come, and so Debbie picks him up and brings him, and someone else brings him back. But we're not really that involved in it. But to pray for it, that's 1:15 p.m. in the afternoon on Tuesday to 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Tuesday. Lister Park, it's really the big outreach with the Muslims, and it's kind of the fulfillment of what I'm saying, this Romans 10:1, that the Muslims would be saved. Although they're also in this in the Saturday outreach, but really particularly this one on Thursday, and that's 6 o'clock in the morning to 7:30 in the morning on a Thursday. And then the Will Exchange, setting up a table in the city center and seeking to engage people. That's 7 o'clock in the morning on Saturday to 8:30 in the morning on Saturday. It's a real joy to be back here, to be back in the great state of Indiana and here in Fayetteville. And so, I don't know, maybe it's unusual to you. I'm really coming back and saying, we really are seeking to do something that we've not been able to do, and we're seeking your prayers to do it. We're thankful for the financial support and all about that. We've said that, but we really need a push in this way of prayer, and I believe it can happen. We've not seen it happen. 103 years, and we've not seen it happen, but we always believed that it could. Pastor.
Did you get those times down? I trust that you did and that you'll be praying. And it's interesting to hear him say, but his attitude is there can be much fruit if we just pray. I trust you will be praying for them. We appreciate him being with us tonight. We're going to close in a word with a song. What are we singing? He leadeth me, O blessed thought. Let's stand and sing this in closing. There'll be an offering plate in the back if you want to give towards the ministry of Art and Debbie. There'll be an offering plate in the back on your way out. You can give in that offering plate. Let's stand and sing. He leadeth me.